Good morning, campers! It's time to rise and shine for another beautiful day at Camp Arawak. We've got everything you need for the summer away from home. Games, bullying, hiking, murder cover-ups, boating, and sexual awakenings that may just drive you mad. The summer camp slasher is a mini-genre within a genre, blending the carefree days of youth with mysterious killers that attack anyone that comes within their territory. Of course, the original Friday the 13th and its first few sequels are the foundation of this mini-genre, but few are as closely associated and as pitch-perfect as 1983's Sleepaway Camp. At first, a cheaply made independent movie trying to quickly cash in on the Friday formula, writer and director Robert Hiltzik movie was not only a hit, but created an instant cult following because of its accidental campy comedy and one of the most infamous twists in horror history. In the decades that followed, Sleepaway Camp slowly grew its following with 4 sequels that stumbled their way to infamy, ranging from the kinda okay to the disastrous. All these years later, and the Sleepaway Camp films are such a strange blend of the accidentally great and the pathetically bad. But what is the strange appeal of these infamous slashers? How have fans reclaimed shocking reveals that could be offensive to anyone with the slightest bit of taste? And just why the hell do I like these movies? Report to your bunks, campers. It's time for a trip back to Sleepaway Camp. The story of Sleepaway Camp begins like any great stories do, with me getting the excuse to talk a little about Friday the 13th again. John Carpenter's Halloween in 1978 may have codified the slasher formula, but it was Sean S. Cunningham's Friday the 13th in 1980 that proved it could be replicated for big bucks. And with its story of a summer camp with a dark history stalked by a killer on reopening, there were a lot of Friday-likes that followed in the next few years, and Friday started pumping out sequels nearly every year, except for 1983, the year Sleepaway Camp arrived, and that probably helped its chances at the box office. Sleepaway Camp is really the complete brainchild of its writer and director, Robert Hiltzik. According to Hiltzik, he was in the midst of getting his master's degree in film at NYU and wanted to jumpstart his movie career. So he started filming while still in the midst of his third year, choosing a horror film because of their popularity, and a camp so it could be all shot in one location to save money, with Hiltzik filming at Camp Algonquin in Argyle, New York, where the creator went to summer camp as a kid. With a budget of only $350,000, the original Friday was shot for around $650,000 for context. Sleepaway Camp was produced by Jerry Silva and Michelle Titosian for American Eagle Films, with cinematography by Benjamin Davis and music by Edward Billis.
Dear Mom and Dad, I've been at a sleepaway camp for almost 3 weeks, and I'm getting very scared.
Emblazoned with the kind yet ominous words, "In fond memory of Mom, a doer," Sleepaway Camp starts with a tragic boating accident that seems to leave one member of a gay couple and one of their children dead, quickly cutting to several years later as the surviving child, Angela Baker, played by Felissa Rose, is living with her cousin Ricky, Jonathan Tiersten, and her Aunt Martha, Desiree Gould, with the cousins sent off to Camp Arawak for the summer. But once at camp, they find their getaway will not be a carefree summer. The counselors are checked out, except for Paul D'Angelo's Ronnie, who I really like in this film. Camp owner Mel is trying to hook up with a camper, the cook is a pedophile, and the campers are constantly fighting, with mean popular girl Judy bullying Angela and playing with her love interest Paul's heart. Oh, and people keep getting horrifically murdered, with Mel covering up the deaths to prevent the camp from being closed. Of all the summer camp slashers that have been made over the years, Sleepaway Camp is probably the closest to reality because of its focus on teen drama and characters actually played by teens. The kills are exaggerated and grotesque, big ol' soup and a whole bunch of bees probably being my favorites, but the cruelty of the kids and the disengaged counselors are much more realistic, which only makes its really weird elements even weirder. Regarding the casting, Hiltzik said that he wanted to avoid the trend in other slasher movies of the time casting 20-somethings to play teenagers, mostly due to legal restrictions on working hours. Instead, he has actual teens playing teens, and the result is that the teen drama, fighting, and really the core of the story's sexual awakening feel much more authentic.
Eat shit and die, Ricky!
Eat shit and live, Bill.
The cast, the crew, we were families for the 5 weeks we were shooting, said Hiltzik. It was a different kind of family because you had very young kids there, and I didn't have a lot of parents around, which surprised me a lot. The parents would basically allow me to care for their kids because they left. We were all in it together and we were in one location, so for 5 weeks it was a terrific experience. In interviews years later, cast members have so many fond memories of the shoot. Basically, everyone describes it like really being at camp, and I think that comes through on screen, and it really contrasts hard against the film's shocking content.
Yo, Angela, how come you're so fucked up?
So now I gotta spoil Sleepaway Camp, but this is one of the most famous twist endings in all of horror history, and the dang movie is more than 40 years old, so I think you can handle it. That opening scene of the boating accidents, all the weirdness of Angela's aunts, the shyness of Angela herself, and the mystery of the camp killings end with the reveal that Angela is the killer. But come on, that's pretty obvious. Although Hiltzik used Ricky's actor as the stand-in for a lot of the pickup shots in the kills. The real twist is that Angela is actually a boy, born Peter and forced to live as a girl when his sister Angela was killed in the accident along with their father. How do we know this? Well, a flashback spelling it all out is helpful.
I mean, we already have a boy, so another one simply would not do. Oh no, absolutely not. A little girl would be so much nicer, don't you think so, Angela?
But so is the full body shot of a naked Angela and her penis. Now, I cannot show you this penis, but it's a very important penis, with Felissa Rose shot in close-ups, and the production using an anonymous college student as her body double, wearing a mask of her face, completely shaving his body, and baring it all. The reveal is disturbing on several levels. First is the inhuman growling of Angela, with Felissa Rose's frozen face revealing an animal inside that's been hiding this whole time. The other is the realization that Angela has been abused and driven insane by her aunt over the course of many, many years, and has gone fully mad by her burgeoning sexuality at camp. A lot goes unsaid, and I think that helps with modern reinterpretations, but Angela's fixation on mean girl Judy, and the start of her relationship with the nice Paul, has sort of forced her to confront her own sexuality, contrasted with the memory of young Peter and Angela seeing their father in bed with his boyfriend, and complicating Angela's views of who she is. Now, having a trans killer at the center of your film was nothing new by the time Sleepaway Camp was released. Honestly, the Angela reveal is just a more explicit version of the Norman Bates reveal in Psycho, while 1980s Dressed to Kill made the trope even more explicit and troubling. Post-Sleepaway, Silence of the Lambs is probably the most famous modern example, but can you really call Angela trans? What were the film's true intentions? The issue really comes with not just having a trans character as a killer, but that being trans has somehow driven these characters insane and pushed them to kill. In some cases, it may be the product of being purposefully transphobic. In others, it may be accidental. But overall, it's a really bad look when the majority of trans representation on screen for years was in the form of psycho killers. If you're watching this video around the time that it's released, the context of making this is really interesting to me, as I've just finished a retrospective on all the Chucky movies, and I find there's actually a lot of overlap between Child's Play and the Sleepaway Camp films. Both are slasher franchises that have queer characters at the center and have been embraced by the LGBTQ community. But while Chucky was created by a gay man, its queer themes only became more explicit in later films as he was given more free rein in the content of his movies. Inversely, Robert Hiltzik is not gay, but Sleepaway Camp was centered on an explicitly queer central character, with the character transitioning to being a woman in later films, and queerness being less and less explicitly part of the narratives. Regarding the film's psychosexual focus, it seems like Hiltzik was really just looking to shock audiences, saying, "I came up with a beginning and I came up with the end. I wanted a good beginning to grab the audience right away and then hold on to them. Then I wanted a shocking ending or a twist they would talk about when they walked out of the movie theater. And then I filled in the middle from that point on. I thought that was something that no one had really seen before and would really shock the system of the audience. The psychosexual angle came about because once I picked that ending, I thought I had to foreshadow it. Otherwise, I'm cheating the audience. So there had to be that issue. Even if it's just below the surface, it had to be presented. What makes the Sleepaway Camp series such an anomaly is that in the time since it started, it's really been reclaimed by the queer community with a new reading of Angela. Angela was driven mad because she was forced to live as a different gender she didn't identify as. But if transitioning allows for men and women to be physically affirmed as the gender they identify as, isn't denying pre-op trans people the ability to be who they want to be the true injustice? I've even seen some describe Sleepaway Camp as a revenge story, but that only goes so far. There's several young kids who are killed by Angela who have nothing to do with her, so you can't really apply that fully. Angela's completely deranged, and Hiltzik has even said that he wishes this scene wasn't in the film. Every other victim of Angela has harmed her in some way. In any case, once art is made, whatever its intentions may be, its meaning and impact are up to the viewers to decide. But they still must grapple with the content of that art. Such are the powers and limitations of queer theory. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that trans rights are human rights. So this one's for all the L's, the G's, the B's, the T's, the Q's, the I's, the A's, and all you lovely pluses. Really, there's two types of Sleepaway Camp fans. One, the queer community that latches onto Angela's story as a trans woman, and all of her struggles and everything that society is putting on her, and the ways in which the sequels transition her willingly into being a woman, and using queer theory to unpack the narrative for everything that it means for the outsider. And two, the scumbum dirtbags that are here to revel in all the insanity of these movies and the kills, and just how crazy it all goes. And well, I was a teenage dirtbag baby. Watching Sleepaway Camp, I can see why each individual member of the queer community could either love or hate the film or somewhere in between. But that's up to each of them to decide, not me. I'm just here giving you greater context for the film. Personally, I really enjoyed this film because it's just so delightfully fucked up. Yet somehow, I also find it to be really charming. If you've watched the channel for a bit, then I'm sure you already know I'm a fiend for slashers. From the classic to the modern, the silly to the dark, the gory to the dramatic. I really love so many different types of them, and in a lot of ways, Sleepaway Camp is just right for me. The kills are brutal and have some fun effects to present a variety of deaths, but they aren't overly graphic. A lot of them actually leave it up to your imagination, probably due to the budget, but I think that works well when combined with the mystery element. And I'd rather not see a hot iron shoved into a hoo-ha. But maybe the true appeal of Sleepaway Camp is just how insane this all seems. Right from the start, with the boating accident, you can tell this is a film that won't be playing anything safe. And then we meet Aunt Martha. And while Desiree Gould is only on screen for a couple minutes, she's easily one of the most memorable characters. And for the first of many times throughout the series, it's a performance that begs the question, bad actor or perfect performance?
Why, of course! I believe there's a whole bag! Why, I'm almost sure of it.
Aunt Martha seems completely disconnected from reality, and with things at Angela and Ricky's home not right, we launch into Camp Arawak's broken home away from home. The way Sleepaway Camp is made feels like the byproduct of a passionate crew that doesn't quite know what they're doing. Like, Hiltzik's film isn't poorly made, but the really stilted performances, the costume and mustache choices, the way the film's pacing will switch from really long softball scenes to brutal kills at a moment's notice, really make you feel like something is deeply, deeply wrong here. Choices like how the end reveal just lingers on Angela for so long, with screeching strings, color changes, and pop music layered over, are odd, but they leave a lasting impression. I can still remember the first time I saw this scene on YouTube years ago in all its 480p glory. What the popularity of the Sleepaway Camp films speaks to is really what makes the horror community so fun. Even if a film is cheaply made or deeply flawed, horror fans are so much more willing to accept and celebrate it if the people involved are passionate about horror and are just trying their best to make something good. The worst thing that a horror film could be, no matter the budget, is to be made by people that don't like horror. We'll speak more to that lasting legacy throughout the video, but when released on November 18th, 1983, Sleepaway Camp was a solid hit, making $11 million. Not huge, but more than 30 times its budget. The strategy to cash in on the slasher boom worked, but what would come next?
Good night, campers.
By 1987, producer Jerry Silva was looking to make Sleepaway Camp into a franchise like many other non-stop slasher series filling theaters throughout the decade. And with Silva getting tiny production company Double Helix to invest, and Hiltzik licensing the rights without his involvement as a creator, Angela was back with not one, but two sequels. Sleepaway Camp II, Unhappy Campers, and Sleepaway Camp III, Teenage Wasteland, both given a very brief theatrical release and then sent straight to video in 1988 and 1989. And with the two essentially a co-production, I'm going to talk about them both right now. And Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 are bad, but mostly enjoyable. Well, mostly. Both films are directed by Michael A. Simpson and written by Michael Hitchcock, going under the pseudonym of Fritz Gordon, with Pamela Springsteen now starring as Angela when Felissa Rose declined to return, saying she didn't really connect with the new comedic take on the character and instead chose to focus on college at the time. However, Rose was very positive about 2 and 3 and Springsteen's take on Angela, later saying, "I love those sequels and she's brilliant." And in order to save money, parts 2 and 3 were made back to back, with the total production cost of both combined ending up under $1 million. And if you're wondering, oh yeah, you can definitely tell. Sleepaway Camp Part 2 picks up 5 years after the original, with Angela's killing spree at Camp Arawak essentially a campfire tale now. But it just so happens that Angela is now serving as a counselor at Camp Rolling Hills, now going by Angela Johnson, but with her murderous impulses still intact. Here, Angela's kills take the form of a sort of twisted moral correction, with her slowly killing off her campers one by one for different forms of misbehavior, and obsessing over camper Molly, the one morally upright camper. Sleepaway Camp Part 3 picks up the next year, with Angela headed to troubled youth retreat Camp New Horizons, killing would-be camper Maria and taking her place. And once again, Angela finds excuses to kill off her fellow campers and counselors, who are essentially cartoonish pieces of shit this time, until she collides with Marcia and Tony, a new couple at camp. Both because of how she's written and how Pamela Springsteen, actual sister of Bruce Springsteen, plays her, Angela is just a completely different character here. Early on, we find out that in the time since the first film, Angela has undergone gender confirmation surgery and is now a woman. But beyond that, she just acts completely different. Whereas the Angela of the original was essentially mute in normal life and an animalistic killer when unleashed, Springsteen's Angela is a very chatty, happy-go-lucky counselor who has basically the same exact attitude when she's singing a camp song and when she's drowning someone in an outhouse full of dookie. And that's really where the dark comedy of parts 2 and 3 come from. Every kill is a teachable moment, with Angela imparting some wisdom on how her victims can live a better life, even though they're dying.
Say no to drugs.
Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 know what they are. Cheap cash-ins on the slasher craze. Part 2 makes this clear with Angela killing off some of her first victims with Freddy and Jason's accoutrement, and the teen victims are all various levels of asshole. The biggest difference is that Angela really is the main character here. We follow her around, see her kills, see how she justifies her actions, and she gets more screen time than any other character. Parts 2 and 3 might not be as good as the original, but they do a lot more to make Angela into a memorable slasher, and in the end, the franchise probably wouldn't have as devoted of a fan base without them. Part 2 is just mean enough. Some of these kills are truly brutal, and I like the idea that Angela is almost obsessed with creating the ideal summer camp experience that she was robbed of at Arawak. She just can't help the violent impulses that come from the many flawed people encountered at the camp. It adds a psychological edge to the character that feels more like a real-life killer than a movie slasher. Neat. And somehow, everyone believes Angela when she says she sent her victims home, when she's actually shoved them all in a locked-up cabin. Oh well, it was the 80s. People were living off landlines and coke. Part 3, on the other hand, really shows its lack of budget and ideas. The entire movie essentially takes place out in some really boring woods under the plot point of this camp going out to the woods for several days away from the cabins. As for the slashing in this slasher, well, most of these characters just kinda walk into their deaths, and the kills are so underwhelming. At one point, Angela just starts smacking someone with a stick. The one interesting thing is that this is the only movie that ends with Angela actually being beaten, as she at first spares Marcia and Tony for being nice people, only for Marcia to have enough of this bullshit and run down Angela and stab her. Sure, Angela might get the last laugh, but you could interpret it as her dying right after.
Just taking care of business.
I guess you could call these guilty pleasures, but I lack the ability to feel guilt, shame, or embarrassment, so I just say, enjoy what you enjoy. These are both such odd movies. They aren't well written or acted or shot, but you can tell everyone's having fun and trying to make something of it. Pamela Springsteen is fun as Angela, and I can never tell where her making Angela into a stunted, confused killer ends, and where the bad acting begins.
Oh! Wake up, everybody! Breakfast in half an hour!
By part 3, there's a real air of fuck it, with Angela running down her victim in broad daylight with a gigantic truck in front of everyone before taking her identity. It seems to say, we don't really care, you shouldn't either. And yeah, it's pretty hard to care. These are movies without ambition. There's no bigger message, and there's also no really troubling representation, just some summer camp slasher vibes. They both sold fine on VHS, and of course would eventually get other home video releases, but despite their mixed critical reception, Angela's story wasn't over. And it would come back in the form of whatever the hell this thing is.
Reconstructed from archive footage and released from the vault. Relive the original nightmare.
Sleepaway Camp IV: The Survivor is really not a movie. It's probably the least movie that a movie has ever movied, so I'm going to talk about this very briefly because it is an incredible waste of time. In 1992, Double Helix Films wanted to make another Sleepaway Camp movie, this time with director Jim Markovich and written by Tom Clohessy. And with Pamela Springsteen moving on from acting and never even wanting to talk about the Sleepaway Camp films in the years since, Carrie Chambers was cast as Angela. I guess that's a spoiler, but no one ever needs to watch this movie. The story follows a woman named Allison, a survivor of Angela's camp rampages who has lost her memory and, on the recommendation of her psychiatrist, goes back to the site of where it all happened. I know all of this because of the low-res scroll that starts the movie. And, of course, Allison is actually Angela, whose memory and killer impulses are triggered by a run-in with a ranger and a hunter. Sleepaway Camp IV began filming in October 1992, but after a little more than 30 minutes of footage had been shot, Double Helix went bankrupt, shutting down the production. And while the crew was hopeful that they could resume filming soon, nothing ever happened. And so the raw footage sat in a can for years. The only thing interesting about 4 is that it was essentially lost media, and it naturally made fans curious. Eventually, the footage was released as a bonus disc on the Survivor Kit DVD collection that was released in 2002 by Anchor Bay. And okay, that's cool, let the work that people did be seen. The worst part is that a so-called completed version of the movie was released on its own DVD in 2012. But it's literally just a montage of the first 3 movies spliced together with about 10 minutes of edited footage from what was shot and some really bad voiceover, CGI stills, and bland music added to bring it to feature length. It's a complete waste of time. It's a cash grab made with as little effort as possible. It's such a terrible excuse for a film that it makes me wish I was watching Gamera Super Monster again.
Turn it off!
How would Sleepaway Camp IV have been as a full feature film as intended? I can't say for sure, but looking at what footage there is, I would say real bad. Given that Sleepaway Camp IV was a disaster, it's not surprising that it took so long for another film to be made. And the making of the film that would eventually become Return to Sleepaway Camp was another disaster. It was the return of original writer and director Robert Hiltzik who managed to get the ball rolling on another film. But according to Felissa Rose, while the film was originally meant to shoot in 2001, the September 11th attacks happened near the end of pre-production, putting everything on pause as it was set to film in New York. Eventually, filming was completed in 2003, but Hiltzik was unhappy with the film's CGI and effects, leading to reshoots, additions, and new effects. So it wasn't until November 2008 that the film was released direct-to-video in the US, and 2009 internationally. And what a strange film it is. Return to Sleepaway Camp, which apparently officially has the subtitle Kids Can Be So Mean according to closing credits, begins decades after the original and essentially ignores the sequels. Here, it's summer at Camp Manabe. Transphobic joke? Maybe. But wouldn't you know it, a bunch of crazy murders start happening again. This time centered around the most annoying character in this franchise, Alan. A character who maybe is supposed to have an intellectual disability, or maybe he's just dumb, or a bully, or a loser? I honestly can't tell. The point is, the entire camp hates him. But is he the killer, or is Angela back? It's Angela. Angela's back and she's disguised as the sheriff. But you could probably tell this character is the secret killer already because it's such an obvious cover-up.
After 35 years of smoking, I lost my larynx to cancer.
Hey dude! Can you play Intergalactic on that thing?
With a few cool new kills and some homages to the original's violence, Return to Sleepaway Camp is essentially just the original film done again, including having a central character who's picked on by the entire camp, having the killer be a mystery until the very end, trying to misdirect the audience the entire film even though who the killer is very obvious, and having the same structure of camp drama punctuated by a covered-up kill until the climactic night. But what Return really shows is that you just can't replicate what made the original film work, at least not with this creative team at the helm. The most frustrating thing about Return is that the entire film is sold on not only having Felissa Rose back as Angela, but that Jonathan Tiersten is back as Ricky, who is essentially forgotten in every other sequel despite being the second most important character in the original. And Paul DeAngelo is back as Counselor Ronnie. But Ricky and Angela are barely in it. Why? Why make the story like this? You clearly had Felissa Rose for this whole shoot. She's in the whole thing in her dang sheriff disguise. Why hide her? Vincent Pastore and Isaac Hayes are also here, with Hayes playing the chef and dressed up as Chef from South Park. Instead, what we got is a bunch of unlikable camp counselors and kids fighting each other. There's not even really a central protagonist. It might seem like Alan, but he's mostly out of the movie by the third act, and thank God, screaming about skinned frogs and then beaten unconscious like Ricky in the original, all for the sake of a really lame reveal right at the end.
Ask him how cool it is now. Angela!
It's bad. Not Sleepaway Camp IV bad, but really disappointing. It's nice to give Felissa Rose another chance to be the character, and in the end, Return was really only possible because it was trading in on the goodwill of the growing cult following of the original. But after this, Sleepaway Camp closed its grounds for good. There had been a little talk about a remake or reboot for a bit, but that went nowhere. Now, more than 20 years after Return was filmed, Sleepaway Camp once again exists as a franchise carried on by die-hard fans. But ain't that just the way it's always been? The growing legacy of Sleepaway Camp really happened over the course of a couple decades alongside Sleepaway Camp IV and Return. The rise of DVDs, special features, and horror conventions really benefited this franchise, as it gave fans the chance to meet the people behind the films, hear the stories at home, and finally be able to re-watch them whenever they wanted. There's something about the early days of the DVD boom that kind of felt like unearthing lost media. Suddenly, something like the alternate cuts and ending of Army of Darkness were available in kinda okay quality, and Sleepaway Camp in particular benefited from the release of the Survival Kit DVD collection in 2002, which brought the first 3 movies together with the previously mentioned bonus disc of Part 4's raw footage. However, the original edition of the box set was recalled when the Red Cross sued over the unofficial use of their symbol. They're very litigious about that. Meanwhile, in the UK, the first 3 films were released as the Nightmare Vacation movies, each heavily censored by the British Board of Film Classification, and yet somehow, that penis is still in there. Eventually, parts 1 through 3 were given Blu-rays, and I guess it really speaks to how rabid the Sleepaway Camp fandom is, because there's a lot of controversy about Scream Factory's 4K releases of 2 and 3, and who they left out of their production. The fandom has also leaked into other media, with rock band CKY, who I loved when I was young, told you I was a teenage dirtbag, being heavily inspired by the films and their fandom, even leading to Felissa Rose and lead singer Darren Miller meeting and getting married. That's so sweet. These films have a lasting fandom because the fans champion them, have fun with them, spread the word, and celebrate them for what they are. Bad movies made with a lot of heart and passion. Okay, so here's where I usually rank all the films in a franchise in my retrospectives, but it's like so obvious. The ranking from worst to best is 4, 5, 3, 2, 1, with the original being the best easily and by far head and shoulders above the rest. It's really kind of obvious, and any fan of this franchise doing a rewatch just for fun or to make a video is kind of have to do a lot of chores to get through all of this, especially when you get closer to the end, or really the back half. 3, it's not very good. It's really boring, and they're really running out of gas. But I think that kind of speaks to the Sleepaway Camp franchise as a whole. This is a series of movies that is successful almost in spite of itself. The original is now basically a classic, or at least a minor cult classic, for anyone that is willing to take a chance on something that might be offensive, but has a lot of fun to it if you just take it for what it is and understand the limited points of view that informed its filming. It's cheesy, it's limited in what it can do, it has bad acting, but it has some good effects, some good kills, some great surprises, and is really in search of an atmosphere that's going to make you uneasy, and then surprise you, make you laugh, and then really turn it all upside down on you by the end, and make you question what you've just seen. If you hate these movies for the trans representation, I totally get it. If you're fine with it, I also get it. But if you're using Sleepaway Camp as an excuse to hate trans people, you should never use a single fictional film to classify and demonize any group of people. The people behind Sleepaway Camp are really just trying to make a fun horror movie with a big twist, and all these years later, a lot of the cast and crew are very supportive of the LGBTQ community, and in turn have been supported by them as well. So if Sleepaway Camp brings up a lot of questions for you, do some research, have an open mind, and support trans rights. After that, parts 2 and 3 aren't nearly as good as the original, but there is this streak of dark comedy that makes them fun. Pamela Springsteen is really fun at the center as this version of Angela, and it's really her that carries these movies along, as everything else kind of falls apart around her. These are D-grade slasher films, but they know what they are, and if you can laugh along with them, you're gonna enjoy them. Part 4 and Return, however, are proof of how any studio, big or small, will really try to squeeze the last drops of money out of any pre-existing IP, and you should really only seek these out if you're a die-hard fan of the Sleepaway franchise, and after you're done watching them, you're probably going to question why you're a die-hard fan. So why did I make this video? Well, I thought it would be fun, but I made the decision to create this retrospective before I'd ever seen Part 4 or Return. Clearly, I'm a glutton for punishment, and I'm already deep into a rewatch of the entire Hellraiser franchise for a retrospective later this year, and that is a series that has so many bad films that it makes the Sleepaway Camp movies look like a walk in the park compared. Still, I can't help but have fondness for a lot of these movies, and whenever I'm in the mood for a horror film that's as shocking as it is charming, I know that I'll soon find myself back at Sleepaway Camp for the summer. Thanks for watching today's video, and I finally made my longtime threat of covering the Sleepaway Camp movies come true. And boy, what movies these are. You know, I had really wanted to talk about the original Sleepaway Camp for a while, but I figured you really need to talk about all of them for the greater context of what these movies are trying to be, and why they have the legacy they want to have. And frankly, 2 and 3 are fun on their own, and I'm happy to rewatch them, especially 2, it's a lot better than 3. But 4 is not a movie, and Return is so disappointing. I was so glad to be done rewatching them by the time I was done with my research and editing of this video, because at times they are really tough to sit through. But I will always rewatch the original Sleepaway Camp, which I think is a minor classic, and a classic because of just how weird and accidentally great it really is. As I mentioned in the video, there is a lot of discussion over the trans representation in Sleepaway Camp, the original in particular, and hopefully I did that conversation justice, because it's complicated and tricky and really varies from person to person upon reinterpretation. Few films are as infamous and also well-loved as Sleepaway Camp in the horror genre. This is also by far the worst franchise that I've ever covered in a full retrospective. It's a series full of bad movies, and some are just more enjoyable than others. Your enjoyment and taste may vary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Sleepaway Camp franchise, and if you've actually seen all of these movies. If you've managed to see 4, congratulations and my condolences. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons and members for their continued support, and if you'd like to be a patron or member, it's only $2 a month for early access to every video and exclusive reviews, with the exclusive review for July being a look at Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So until next time, I hope that you're taking care of yourselves and having a happy Son of Summerween.
I'll kick your freaking asses over this gun!